She never should have done it. Maya Collins knew that the second her shaking fingers pressed a crumpled $200 bill into a stranger's hand outside the Harrington Mansion gates. "Please," she whispered, "just pretend to be my boyfriend tonight." Inside that house, her relatives were still laughing, counting their Thanksgiving gifts, gifts worth more than 2 years of Maya's wages, and someone just asked, way too loud, why she was still broke. Still single, still the family's biggest disappointment. The stranger said nothing. He just took the money, looked at her face with eyes like cold, gray steel, and followed her through the door. His coat was dark. His back was straight, and the second he walked into that room full of rich, cruel people, something in the air shifted. They laughed at his plainclothes. They laughed even harder. Then Daniel Cross, the bodyguard, reached for his gun. Old Frank, the butler, dropped his eyes to the floor, and Richard Mercer, the man who was supposed to marry Maya's cousin, Tessa, went dead white when he recognized the man holding Maya's hand. The room didn't just go quiet, it went cold, because the man Maya had just paid $200 to play pretend was Mateo Vance, the most ruthless mob boss in all of New York, the man whose name could silence a boardroom, empty a street, and he had just walked into a Thanksgiving dinner on the arm of a girl who had no idea she'd just handed her last $200 to the devil himself. What Maya doesn't know yet, the man she hired to save her from one nightmare is about to become a much, much more dangerous one. Nobody dared to breathe. The huge living room of the Harrington Mansion felt like all the air had been sucked out of it. What was left was heavy, crushing, impossible to breathe through. Maya stood there, her hand still resting in the hand of the man she had just paid $200 to lie for her. And she could not figure out how everything had gone so wrong, so fast. Just seconds ago, they had been laughing at him. Now they were shaking. Aunt Clara was the first one brave enough to try to break the silence. She stepped forward, slapped on a stiff smile, like she was greeting an old friend. "It is such an honor to welcome Mr. Vance into our home," she said. Mateo didn't even look at her. His cold gray eyes swept slowly across the room, taking in every face, every reaction, every bead of sweat sliding down the foreheads of the people who had been laughing the loudest just a moment ago. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, unhurried, like every single word had been weighed before he said it. "Humble," he repeated, one corner of his mouth lifting just slightly, no warmth in it at all. "I just watched how you treated my woman in this house." Richard Mercer stepped forward, trying to look like the confident businessman he pretended to be. His shoulders were still tight. "Vance, this is a family matter. I don't see how it concerns you." Mateo turned his head slowly toward Richard. Maya felt his grip on her hand tighten, not rough, not possessive, just like a quiet promise. "Mercer." Mateo said his name like he was talking about a bug. "You're standing in someone else's living room, talking about family matters, while your fiancé is sitting right over there. And yet you haven't taken your eyes off the girl standing next to me all evening. So who exactly needs to explain themselves here?" Richard's face went white again. Tessa, sitting on the sofa with her engagement ring catching the light, felt something shift. She looked at Richard, then at Maya, then back at Richard, suspicion spreading through her eyes like oil on water. Mateo guided Maya to the one empty chair in the room, the chair she had never once been allowed to sit in during the 19 years she'd spent under this roof. A quiet symbol of 27 years of being treated like less than nothing. He pulled it out, waited for her to sit, then stood right behind her like a wall that nothing could knock down. "Dinner will continue," he said. Not a suggestion, an order. And this time she sits at the table. Nobody argued. Aunt Clara waved to the servants to bring more food. Tessa bit her lip and swallowed her anger. Pastor Henry, who had been loudly judging Maya for being poor and alone just minutes ago, now bowed his head to say grace like he hadn't said a word. Dinner dragged on in miserable silence. Maya could barely swallow a single bite. She could feel the warmth of the man standing behind her, and it both calmed her and terrified her at the same time. She didn't know what he wanted. She didn't know why he was there. She only knew that her life had just turned onto a road she could not control. When dinner ended, Matteo nodded for Maya to follow him into the hallway. She went, her steps unsteady. Once they were far enough that no one could hear, she finally asked the question that had been burning inside her all evening. "Why are you here? Why were you standing outside this house?" Matteo looked at her, and for the first time there was something in those steel, gray eyes beyond cold and distant. "I've been watching Richard Mercer," he said. "He's running a money laundering operation through fake companies, and one of his money transfer points is right near this property. I came tonight to watch from outside, not to go in." Maya's heart seemed to stop. "So me hiring you was an accident." Matteo tilted his head, looking at her like she was a puzzle he was slowly working out. "An accident," he repeated slowly. "Maybe, or maybe the world has its own way of setting things up. What matters now is that Mercer knows you belong to me. And he won't dare touch what belongs to me." Maya wanted to say she didn't belong to anyone, but looking into those cold eyes, watching how an entire room full of powerful people had trembled in front of him, she understood something. She had stepped into a completely different world, a world where danger and protection were twisted together so tight you couldn't tell them apart, where the line between being saved and being trapped was as thin as a single strand of hair. And she didn't know yet whether she had just been set free or whether she had walked straight into a brand new cage. Maya Collins learned how to make herself invisible when she was very young, not physically, though hunger sometimes left her so thin it felt like people could see right through her. But emotionally, she learned to lower her eyes when adults were talking, step aside when food was served, smile in a way that said thank you for letting me exist. By the time she was 10, she had already figured out a painful truth. In Aunt Clara's house, love had a price tag, and your worth was measured by what you could give. But before she learned that lesson, Maya had lived a completely different life. She remembered the smell of apple pies her mom baked every Sunday morning. She remembered her dad's laughter when he lifted her onto his shoulders and ran across the backyard of their little house outside Boston. She remembered what it felt like to be safe, warm, loved without conditions. Then it all disappeared in a single night. Maya was 8 years old when fire swallowed her home. She remembered it with a cruelty that never faded. The sound of breaking glass, the sting of smoke in her eyes, her dad's hands pushing her through the first floor window as the flames started climbing the stairs. "Jump, sweetheart, I'll be right behind you." Those were the last words he ever said to her. Maya jumped. Her left shoulder slammed into a burning piece of wood falling from the porch roof. She screamed, rolled across the wet grass to put out the flames clinging to her nightgown. When she looked back up, the window where her dad had been was already swallowed by fire. She screamed for her parents until her throat tore raw. Nobody answered. The fire trucks came too late. They found her parents in the upstairs bedroom. The report said it was an electrical malfunction. Maya never believed it. She was only 8, but she remembered the lights working perfectly before she went to bed. She remembered strange noises near the back door. She remembered her father being tense for weeks, whispering into the phone with a worried face. But nobody listens to a traumatized 8-year-old. Aunt Clara showed up 1 week after the funeral. She was her mom's sister, a woman Maya had only met a handful of times because the sisters were never close. She arrived with guardianship papers already ready and a gentle smile for the news cameras. "I'll take care of my poor niece. That's what family does." It took years for Maya to understand the truth. Her parents had a large life insurance policy, more than enough to take care of a child until adulthood. The money went to the legal guardian, and Aunt Clara spent every dollar, not on Maya, on a mansion on Long Island. Luxury cars, private schools for Tessa. Maya slept in a tiny attic room, wore Tessa's throne, away clothes. Started doing housework at 9 years old. She cleaned, cooked, washed, and kept her head down every time Aunt Clara reminded her how generous it was to have taken her in. Do you know what people would say if they knew about that night? Aunt Clara asked her the first time Maya was 12, after she dared to ask for money for school textbooks. The only daughter who survived the fire, the daughter who, according to some people, might have done something to cause it, Maya froze. "I didn't do anything. I was asleep." Aunt Clara smiled, the kind of smile Maya would spend years being afraid of. "I know, but others don't. And if you want me to stay quiet about what really happened that night, you'd better learn how to be grateful." From that moment, Maya never asked for anything again. She worked, she stayed silent. She existed like a shadow in the house that had been built with her parents' money. The burn scar on her left shoulder was never properly treated. It left behind a twisted, discolored patch of skin that Tessa never stopped making fun of. 19 years Maya lived as an unpaid servant, controlled by fear and shame for a crime she never committed. She finished high school at the top of her class, but was never allowed to go to college. She worked at diners and bars, handing over almost every dollar she earned to her aunt as repayment for being raised. She dreamed of escaping, but never had enough money or enough courage until tonight, until she placed her last $200 into the hand of a stranger and accidentally pulled the devil himself into her life. Now, standing in the hallway of the Harrington mansion, looking into the cold gray eyes of Matteo Vance, Maya found herself wondering, was this freedom or just another kind of cage? After that Thanksgiving night, Matteo Vance left without making any promises. He only slipped a business card into Maya's hand, his name in plain black letters on the front, a string of handwritten phone numbers on the back. "If anything happens, call me anytime." Maya hid the card inside the lining of her old handbag, a place Aunt Clara would never think to look. She didn't know if she would ever use it. She only knew that for the first time in her life she had a backup plan, an emergency exit, even if she had no idea where it led. But if Maya thought everything would go back to normal after that night, she was wrong. Everything changed, just not the way she expected. Richard Mercer started showing up at the Harrington mansion way more often. Before, he only came on weekends to see Tessa, bringing flowers, chocolates, sweet words. Now he came almost every day, with excuses that got thinner every time. He wanted to talk wedding plans with Aunt Clara. He needed a quiet place to work. He was just passing by, but his eyes never searched for Tessa first. They always swept the room until they found Maya. The first time Maya realized something was wrong was when she was washing dishes in the kitchen. Richard walked in, said he just needed a glass of water. But instead of going to the sink on the other side of the room, he circled behind her, too close. His hand brushed her back as he reached past her for a glass on the shelf. A glass he could have reached without touching her at all. Maya froze, feeling like 1,000 ants were crawling up her spine. "Sorry," Richard said, but he didn't move away. His voice dropped low, almost in her ear. "You look beautiful when you do housework." She didn't answer. She didn't dare. She stood completely still until he finally left, his hand grazing her hip on the way out like a reminder that he could touch her whenever he wanted. In the days that followed, the touches got more frequent, a hand on her shoulder when she cleared the table, fingers brushing her arm when she poured tea, stares that lasted too long when she bent down to pick something up. Richard never crossed the line in front of others, but he always found ways to be alone with her, always found ways to make her understand that his attention was not accidental. Tessa didn't see it, or she chose not to. Maya wasn't sure which one was worse. Once she tried to warn Tessa, tried to tell her that her fiancé couldn't be trusted, but Tessa just laughed, her eyes as cold as ice. "Who do you think you are?" Tessa asked with open disgust, an ugly little maid covered in scars. "And you think Richard would look at you? Don't flatter yourself, and don't try to ruin my happiness." Maya said nothing more. She was used to not being believed, not being heard, not being worth anything. 1 week after Thanksgiving, Richard invited the whole family to a dinner at an expensive restaurant in Manhattan. Maya didn't want to go, but Aunt Clara made her. "You're going to serve. Don't think that Vance man gives you any status." At the restaurant, Maya tried to stay as far from Richard as possible. But when she slipped into the hallway to find the restroom, he was already waiting. He blocked her path, one hand braced against the wall, his tall body forming a wall around her, trapping her in the corner. "You think Vance will protect you?" Richard asked, his breath heavy with wine and threat. "He's just a stray dog, and you're what I want, and what I want I get." Maya was trembling, her back pressed to the wall, searching for a way out that didn't exist. She opened her mouth to scream, and a voice cut through the air like a blade. "Mercer!" Cold as ice, deep as thunder, Richard spun around, and Maya saw Matteo Vance standing at the end of the hallway. Those steel, gray eyes burning with something way more dangerous than anger. It was a promise of what was coming. "I think you're touching something that doesn't belong to you," Matteo said. He stepped forward, each step slow and steady. Like a predator closing the space between himself and his prey, Richard backed up, trying to look calm. His voice shook anyway. "She doesn't belong to anyone. She's just a servant." Matteo stopped inches from him. When he spoke, his voice was so soft it was almost a whisper, but every word landed like a punch. "This is my final warning. If I see you touch her again, if I even hear that you went near her, I won't kill you right away. I'll take everything you love first. Every business, every bank account, every person you care about. And when you have nothing left, when you're on your knees begging me to let you go, that's when I'll let you go." Richard swallowed, his face white as a corpse. He said nothing, just turned and walked away fast. Matteo turned to Maya, and for just a second she saw those steel eyes soften the tiniest bit. "Are you okay?" Maya nodded, even though her heart was still pounding. "You were watching me. I protect what belongs to me," he replied simply, like that explained everything. And from that night on, Maya knew, whether she wanted it or not, her life was now inside the orbit of Matteo Vance. After that night at the restaurant, everything got worse, worse than Maya had ever imagined possible. Aunt Clara called her into the study the very next morning, her face cold as stone, her eyes burning with something between rage and greed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Aunt Clara hissed through her teeth. "You made this whole family look like a joke in front of Richard, in front of that Vance man." Maya tried to explain. She tried to say she had done nothing wrong, that she was only protecting herself, but she already knew her words wouldn't be heard. "They never were. From now on, you don't leave this house," Aunt Clara said, reading out a sentence. "No work, no going out, no calling anyone. You stay here until I decide what to do with you, but my job's Maya tried. They'll fire me. I already called the diner and the bar. Aunt Clara cut in sharply. You don't work there anymore, and whatever money you have left, give it to me. Call it partial repayment for all the years I raised you." Maya's heart dropped into an abyss. That money was everything. Every dollar saved from late night shifts, from meals she skipped, from things she never let herself buy. She had been planning to use it to escape someday. Now even that tiny dream was being taken. Maya handed over the money with shaking hands. Aunt Clara counted every bill, making no effort to hide how satisfied she was. Then she waved Maya away like she was shooing off a stray dog. The days that followed blurred into a never-ending nightmare. Maya was locked in the house, allowed out of her room only to do chores. Her phone was taken, the attic door was locked from the outside every night. Tessie floated by with a satisfied smile, tossing out cruel little comments about how Maya had brought this on herself. Aunt Clara gave orders without warmth, treating her like a tool, not a human being. The only person who showed Maya any kindness was Frank. The old butler. He had worked for the Harrington family for over 30 years. He never looked at her with the contempt the others did. He always called her Miss Maya instead of nothing. During those locked away days, it was Frank who secretly brought leftover food up to her room when Aunt Clara forgot to leave her dinner. Frank who left a glass of warm water outside her door every morning. Frank who was the only one who made Maya feel like she was still a person. One night, about 2 weeks after she was locked away, Frank knocked softly on her door. The whole house was asleep. His wrinkled old face was tight with worry, his eyes darting around like he was afraid someone was watching. "Miss Maya," Frank whispered, his voice shaking, "I need to tell you something. I shouldn't, but my conscience won't let me stay quiet." Maya let him in. Her heart already pounding, she knew that whatever was forcing Frank to take this risk, it couldn't be good. "This afternoon, I accidentally overheard a conversation between Mrs. Clara and Mr. Mercer," Frank said, his old hands clasped tight together. "Mr. Mercer offered her money, a lot of money. The blood drained from Maya's body. For what?" she asked. Even though deep down she already knew, Frank looked at her with eyes full of pity and shame on behalf of the family he'd served. "To own you," Frank said, each word like a stone dropping into still water. "Mr. Mercer said he would cover all expenses, take you away from here, remove the burden Mrs. Clara has been carrying all these years." He used words like that, a burden, like you were something to be gotten rid of. Maya felt sick. She wanted to believe that no matter how cruel Aunt Clara was, she would never actually sell her own niece. But she knew her aunt better than that. She knew that in Aunt Clara's world, blood meant nothing next to money. "What did she say?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Frank shook his head, his face full of pain. "She didn't say no. She said she would think about it. She asked if Mr. Mercer could pay more because you've caused too much trouble with that Vance man." Maya's world completely fell apart. She had been used, exploited, ignored, but being sold like property, like an object, was something she had never, ever imagined. Frank placed his old, wrinkled hand on her shoulder. "You need to leave this place, Miss Maya. I don't know where you'll go, but you cannot stay here. If Mrs. Clara agrees to Mr. Mercer's offer, I can't even think about what will happen to you." Maya nodded, tears sliding down her face. She thought about the business card hidden in the lining of her old handbag, about the handwritten numbers, about cold gray eyes that weren't entirely without warmth. "If anything happens, call me." Maybe it was time. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay on the narrow bed in her attic room, staring at the peeling ceiling while her mind spun with everything Frank had told her. Sold, she was about to be sold like an object. 27 years of life, and this is all she was worth in her family's eyes. A sum of money, a transaction, a convenient way to throw out the trash. Close to 3 in the morning, when the whole house had fallen into silence, the old phone Frank had secretly given her started to vibrate. Unknown number, Maya hesitated, then answered. You know who this is. The voice was low and cold, but she knew it instantly. Mateo Vance, how do you have this number? She asked, her heart pounding. I have my sources. Mateo replied. Short, direct, listen, I don't have much time. Richard Mercer just finalized the deal with your aunt. The exchange happens tomorrow. You need to get out of that house right now. The blood in Maya's veins went cold. The deal was done, not under consideration. Done. Aunt Clara had agreed to sell her. I don't have any money, Maya said, her voice shaking. I have nowhere to go. You have me, Mateo said. And something in his voice made her want to believe him. Leave the house, go east 2 blocks. There'll be a black car waiting. My driver will take you somewhere safe. Why are you helping me? She asked. I have my reasons, Mateo said, but this isn't the time. You have 15 minutes. The call ended. Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed what mattered, a few things that were actually hers in this house. A photo of her parents, a few changes of clothes, Mateo's business card. She opened the attic window, the one she had quietly figured out how to unlock years ago on nights she needed air to breathe. The roof was slick with night dew, but Maya was used to it. She climbed down carefully, gripping the gutter. Dropped onto the grass behind the house. Her heart thundered as she ran through the dark garden toward the back gate. Freedom. For the first time in her life, she was running toward freedom. But freedom doesn't come easy. Maya had been outside the back gate for less than a minute when 2 dark shapes stepped out of the shadows. Richard's bodyguards, she recognized them right away, the same men who had stood like statues during that Thanksgiving dinner. The same men who had trembled in front of Mateo, but now they were looking at her like predators. Where are you rushing off to, little girl? One of them said with a smirk. The boss is waiting for you. Maya turned to run. A rough hand grabbed her arm and yanked her back. She screamed, struggled. The other man clamped something wet and chemical, smelling over her mouth. Don't make this difficult, he hissed in her ear. Mr. Mercer doesn't like damaged goods. They dragged her toward a car parked in the dark, and Maya knew. If she got in that car, she would never get out. In her panic, as one man opened the door and the other's grip loosened for just a split second, Maya bit down hard on the hand covering her mouth. The bodyguard shouted and jerked back on instinct, and Maya used that single second to yank the phone from her pocket and call back the last number. She didn't get the chance to say a word. The bodyguard ripped the phone away, slammed it to the ground, crushed it under his boot. But for just one breath, she had heard the familiar voice on the other end, and she prayed Mateo Vance had heard her scream before the line went dead. Before darkness swallowed her whole, the car sped through the night. Maya lay curled in the back seat, hands tied, mouth gagged, tears running down her face. She didn't know where they were taking her, only that with every passing second, she was being dragged closer to whatever hell Richard Mercer had prepared for her. One of the bodyguards was on the phone, his voice thick with triumph. They had her, on the way to the meeting point. 20 minutes out, Maya closed her eyes, trying not to imagine what came next. Then everything happened at once. The car slammed to a stop, tires screaming against the road. Maya was thrown forward, her head hitting the back of the front seat. The driver cursed, Through the narrow gap between the seats, she saw a line of black cars blocking the road. Headlights blazing like furious eyes in the dark. Doors flying open. Men stepping out with guns, moving with the sharp efficiency of people who had done this before. And standing among them, taller than all the rest, in a dark coat with those steel, gray eyes cold as iron, was Matteo Vance. "Get out of the car." His voice carried through the night without being loud. Richard's bodyguards looked at each other, tried to calculate their odds. One of them raised his gun. A shot rang out before he could use it. Maya screamed through the gag as the man went down, blood pouring from his shoulder. Matteo lowered his weapon, a thin curl of smoke drifting from the barrel. That was the shoulder. The next one is the head. Out of the car. Now, the other bodyguard didn't need to be told again. He opened the door, raised both hands, stepped out on shaking legs. Matteo's men moved in fast, and then Matteo himself walked to the car. Opened the back door, saw Maya. For just a second, the steel in his eyes went somewhere else. The cold vanished. The distance disappeared. Something dangerous and burning took their place before he pulled it back behind his walls. Matteo bent down and gently pulled the gag from Maya's mouth, then cut the ropes on her wrists with a small knife. "You're safe now," he said, his voice softer. "I have you." Maya couldn't speak. She just looked at him, tears still falling. And when he reached out his hand, she grabbed it like it was the only solid thing in open water. Matteo helped her out of the car. When her legs shook too much to hold her, he simply slipped one arm under her and lifted her like she weighed nothing. He told his men to take the bodyguards to the warehouse. He'd deal with them later. Never taking his eyes off Maya, he carried her to his car, set her in the back seat, got in beside her. The car moved through the night. Maya realized she was shaking violently, not from cold, but from shock, fear, relief, and about 100 other emotions crashing into each other all at once. A warm coat was draped over her shoulders. She looked up into Matteo's eyes. "Why?" she asked, her voice raw. "Why did you come?" He didn't answer right away, jaw tight, staring out the window, weighing something. "Finally, because I made a promise," he said, "and because I don't abandon what belongs to me." Maya wanted to say she didn't belong to anyone. But that night in that car, wrapped in the warmth of his coat that still carried the scent of him, she didn't have the strength to argue. They reached Manhattan as the first light of dawn began to crack open the sky. The car stopped in front of a tall, sleek high-rise. Matteo took Maya up to the penthouse at the very top. The apartment was enormous, glass walls on every side, the whole city glittering below. But Maya had nothing left in her to take it in. She was empty. A woman with dark hair and kind eyes was already waiting. Matteo introduced her, Dr. Nina Shaw. She would examine Maya. Dr. Nina led her into a private room and gently asked her to change. And when Maya slipped off the coat, when the bruises on her arms came into view, when the burn scar on her shoulder was exposed, when Dr. Nina saw the signs of years of not eating enough, barely sleeping, being broken down slowly. The doctor had to turn away for a moment. Just to collect herself after the exam, Dr. Nina stepped outside where Matteo was waiting, his face tight with something he was fighting to hold in. Maya couldn't hear the words, but through the crack in the door she saw the way Matteo's jaw locked, the way his hands trembled, the way his gray eyes went dark with a cold fury more terrifying than any raised voice. And she knew whatever Dr. Nina had told him had changed something, in the way he looked at her, and in the battle she hadn't even known she had become the center of. The first days in Matteo's penthouse, passed like a strange dream Maya wasn't sure she wanted to wake up from. The apartment was bigger than the entire first floor of the Harrington mansion, polished wood floors, floor-to-ceiling glass looking out over the Manhattan skyline, furniture that probably cost more than many years of her wages. She was given her own bedroom, her own bathroom, a bed so soft she could barely sleep that first night. Her body had simply never known anything like it. But the luxury came with rules. She couldn't leave the penthouse without a guard. She couldn't contact anyone from her old life. She couldn't step onto the balcony alone at night. Everything she needed would be provided, but she had to ask. Mateo explained it was for her safety. Richard Mercer was still out there, furious that the thing he thought he'd already bought had been taken from him. Until that situation was settled, Maya needed protection. She understood, she really did, but understanding didn't stop the suffocating feeling. She had escaped one cage only to step into another, even if this one was lined with velvet. On the third day, when a servant brought breakfast to her room, Maya refused it. She went down to the kitchen herself, dug through the massive refrigerator, made her own simple meal. Fried eggs, toast, a cup of black coffee. Nothing fancy, but she made it herself with her own hands. And that mattered more than any fancy breakfast someone else prepared. Mateo found her washing dishes when he came back from a meeting. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a long moment, just watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "You don't have to do that," he finally said. "I have staff." Maya didn't turn around. "I know, but I want to. I'm not used to sitting still." "Is there something wrong with letting people take care of you?" Mateo asked, and there was something in his voice she couldn't quite define. "Nothing wrong with it," she said, setting the last plate on the rack and turning to face him. "But I've spent 27 years living by my own hands. I don't know any other way. And I don't want to owe anyone anything, including you." Mateo tilted his head, looking at her like she was a strange creature he'd never seen before. "You're not like the others," he said. "What others?" Maya asked. "The ones who want something from me," Mateo replied. "The ones who grab for any chance to climb higher. The ones who see money and power and forget who they are." Maya gave a small, tired smile. "I have nothing to lose, Mr. Vance. I hit bottom a long time ago. Your money and power can't buy me because I have nothing to sell." From that moment, a quiet routine formed. Maya woke early every morning, cooked breakfast for herself, and sometimes for Mateo if he was home. She cleaned her own room, washed her own clothes, turned down every offer of shopping or gifts. She found a corner of the penthouse with good light and started drawing again. Simple pencil sketches on paper she'd asked for from Mateo's office. He watched her day after day with growing curiosity. She didn't demand things. She didn't flirt. She didn't compliment him. She just lived quietly, stubbornly, like a wildflower pushing through a crack in concrete. One evening, Tommy Rush, Mateo's right-hand man, stopped by the penthouse. He was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much. When Maya passed through the living room carrying a cup of tea, she gave Tommy a polite nod and disappeared into her room. Tommy watched the door close, then turned to Mateo with a serious expression. "Boss, I need to be straight with you." "Go ahead," Mateo said. His gaze still on the closed door. "She's changing you," Tommy said quietly. "I've been with you 20 years. I've never seen you like this. You canceled 3 meetings last week to come home earlier. You don't look at people like you want to destroy them anymore. You even smile, a real smile, not the kind you give before someone loses everything." Mateo was quiet for a long time. "And that's a problem?" he asked. "Not a problem," Tommy said, shaking his head, "but it's dangerous. In this world, feelings are weaknesses, and weaknesses get used against you. If Richard Mercer's people find out how much she matters to you, they'll use her to destroy you. Matteo stood and walked to the window, staring down at the city glittering below. He knew Tommy was right. He had known it for a while. But when he thought of Maya's eyes, of the way she looked at him without fear, of the way she couldn't be bought by anything, he couldn't make himself turn back. "Maybe she is changing me," Matteo finally said, his voice light and quiet. "The question is that really a bad thing?" That night, Matteo came home later than usual. And for the first time since Maya arrived, she could see that he wasn't entirely himself, not drunk enough to fall down, but enough that his steps were slightly unsteady, enough that the steel in his gray eyes had softened around the edges, enough that the cold wall he always kept up had a few cracks in it. Maya was sitting in the living room reading when he walked in. She was about to stand and give him space, but Matteo just dropped into the chair across from her, still holding a glass of whiskey, and stared at the space in front of him. "Today is the anniversary of my father's death," he said, not looking at her. 18 years ago, this exact night, I was 18, and I watched him die right in front of me." Maya closed her book and said nothing, just listened because she understood. Sometimes silence is the greatest gift you can give someone. "My father believed in honor," Matteo continued, his voice weighed down by pain he had carried a long, long time. "He believed that even in this world, among killers and criminals, loyalty could still exist. He believed in his own brother, Uncle Carlo, the man he built his empire with. His secrets, everything." He stopped, drained the rest of his whiskey in one swallow, set the glass down hard. "Uncle Carlo sold my father out to a rival family. They ambushed him right in front of our house. I was there, standing on the front steps, watching my father take 7 bullets. 7. I counted every single one, and I could do nothing. I was 18, didn't even know how to hold a gun properly. Just stood there and watched the man I respected most collapse in his own blood." Maya felt her chest tighten. She looked at the man across from her, the most powerful mob boss in New York, the one the entire city was afraid of. And for the first time she saw the 18-year-old boy still buried somewhere inside him, the boy who lost everything in a single night, and was forced to carry the whole world on his shoulders. "From that day on, I swore I would never trust anyone again," Matteo said, his voice rough. "Feelings are weakness. Weakness gets people killed. I lived by that rule for 18 years, until he lifted his head, his gray eyes meeting hers, until you showed up with 200 crumpled dollars and a crazy plan." Maya didn't know what to say. She just sat in the heavy, quiet air full of secrets and pain, and realized she wasn't the only one carrying scars. "I lost my parents in one night too," she finally said, her voice light as a breath. "I was 8, there was a fire, and for 19 years Aunt Clara used that night to control me. She told me people would think I caused it, that I killed my parents, that if I didn't obey, she'd let that story out." Matteo looked at her. In his eyes was a kind of understanding Maya had never once received from anyone. "You didn't cause it." "No," she shook her head as the tears finally broke free, "but I tried to go back and save them. The window was on fire and I still tried to climb up. That's when I got burned." Her hand moved to her left shoulder, the scar hidden beneath her clothes. "This scar is the only thing I have left from that night. And Victoria, Tessa, Aunt Clara, they always said it was ugly, that no one would ever want a girl with a ruined body like mine." Matteo stood slowly, moved closer, sat down beside her on the sofa, closer than he had ever been. Maya could smell the faint scent of whiskey, the warmth of sandalwood from his clothes. "Show me," he said, his voice strangely gentle. Maya hesitated. She had never let anyone see that scar except Dr. Nina. It was her shame. Proof of imperfection she had been taught her whole life to hide, but something in Mateo's eyes that night, something real and open and vulnerable, made her slowly pull her collar aside and reveal the twisted, discolored, uneven skin on her left shoulder. Mateo looked at it for a long time. Maya braced herself for disgust, for pity, for the reactions she had known her whole life. Instead, he raised his hand, and those fingers, the fingers that had held guns, taken lives, built an empire, touched her scar with the gentleness of someone handling something precious. "This isn't ugly," Mateo said, low, certain. "This is proof that you loved them, proof that you were willing to die for the people you loved. Anyone who told you it was something to be ashamed of, they're the ones who should be ashamed." Maya cried. She couldn't stop any more. For 27 years she had carried that scar like a curse, and for the first time someone saw it as something to be proud of. Mateo didn't say anything else. He just sat there, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, letting her cry, letting her release what she had been holding inside for far too long. When Maya finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen, she realized the space between them had closed. So close she could feel his breath against her cheek. They didn't kiss that night. They just sat together, two broken people finding comfort in each other's darkness, until the dawn light crept through the curtains, and the real world asked them to go back to who they were supposed to be. 1 week after the night they shared their scars, everything collapsed. Maya was sitting by the window sketching when Mateo walked in. His face was dark like a storm rolling in. He didn't say a word. He walked to the TV and switched on the local news. On the screen, a small diner was on fire, thick black smoke twisting into the night sky, fire trucks and ambulances surrounding the scene. Maya recognized it instantly. It was Millie's diner, the place where she had worked night shifts for 3 years, where Millie herself always saved leftover food for Maya at the end of the day, where Maya had once felt like she actually mattered, even just a little. "No," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "No, no, no. Millie is critically injured," Mateo said, his voice stretched tight like wire about to snap. "Burns over more than half her body. Emergency surgery. They don't know if she'll make it." Maya felt her knees give way. She sank to the floor, tears pouring, only one thought spinning in her head. Why Millie? "Because of you," Mateo said. He threw an envelope onto the floor in front of her. Maya picked it up with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph of her, taken without her knowing, while she was working at the diner, and a scrap of paper with messy handwriting. "Anyone close to you is cursed. Who's next? The old butler or Vance himself?" At the bottom, a stylized letter. "M. Mercer. This is a declaration of war," Mateo said. And when Maya looked up at him, his gray eyes were burning with something colder and more terrifying than rage. "He thinks he can touch what's mine and walk away. He's wrong. Tommy is gathering the men. Tonight we strike back." Maya stood, wiped her tears, stepped directly in front of Mateo. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "What did you just say?" Mateo's eyes narrowed. "I said no." Maya repeated, "If you attack Richard tonight, there will be a war. War means blood. Your people." "His people, innocent people caught in the middle. How many will die because of me? He hurt Millie," Mateo growled, stepping closer. "You think I'm going to just let that go? Richard Mercer needs to learn there are things he's not allowed to touch, and he needs to learn it in blood. Then let me go," Maya said, and she felt Mateo go completely still. "If I'm the reason for all of this, let me leave. I'll disappear. Richard won't have any reason to come after you or anyone connected to me. I'm used to disappearing. I'm good at it." Mateo looked at her, and something in his eyes broke. He moved so fast Maya couldn't react, his hands closing around her arms, not rough, but not letting go either. "You think I'll let you leave?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "After everything that's happened, you think I'll open that door and let you walk out and disappear?" "I'm not your prisoner," Maya said. "You said I wasn't. Which means I have the right to leave." "You're not a prisoner." Matteo agreed, pulling her closer, so close she could feel the heat of his breath on her lips. "But you're not a stranger either. You're someone I would burn this entire city to protect. And if you think I'll let you go just because you want to sacrifice yourself, you're wrong. I don't need you to protect me," Maya said. But her voice came out weak. "I need to," Matteo replied, "not because you're helpless, but because for the first time in 18 years, I found something worth protecting. That's not just my empire." And then he kissed her, not gently, not softly. Matteo Vance's kiss tasted of desperation, of rage that had been held back too long, of a fear of losing something he didn't even know how to name. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like if he let go, she would vanish, like this might be the last time he was ever allowed to touch her. Maya kissed him back. She didn't know exactly when she started wanting to, but she kissed him back with everything she had, with the loneliness of 27 years, with the longing to belong somewhere, with the strange and overwhelming truth that in the arms of the most ruthless mob boss in the city, she felt safer than she had ever felt anywhere else. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Foreheads touching, the world outside Richard Mercer, war, blood, and fire didn't seem to exist anymore. "I won't let you go," Matteo whispered, "and I won't start a war tonight. But Richard Mercer will pay my way. My time." Maya nodded, knowing that whether she'd chosen it or not, she was now bound to this man in a way that couldn't be undone. 2 days after that kiss, the first message arrived. Maya was alone in the penthouse when the phone Matteo had given her started to buzz. Unknown number. She was about to ignore it when a second message came through. "Mia, it's Tessa. Please don't block me. I need to talk to you." Maya's chest tightened. She stared at that name, the name tied to years of humiliation, of being laughed at, of being treated like she was less than nothing. Her finger moved toward the block button. A third message appeared before she could press it. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I just found out the truth about Mom and Richard, about what they did to you. I'm scared, Mia. I don't know what to do." Maya read it again and again. Part of her, the part that had been hurt too many times, screamed that this was a trap. But another part, the part that still believed in blood, the part that still longed for some piece of family, whispered that maybe Tessa had changed. Maybe after finding out who Richard really was, she had finally understood. Maya didn't reply right away. She waited until Matteo came home. She was going to tell him, but he walked in looking exhausted, a long day dealing with the fallout from the diner fire. He kissed her forehead, asked if she was okay, then went straight to his study for more calls. Maya watched the door close and decided to say nothing. Not yet. She needed to know what Tessa actually wanted first. Over the next few days, more messages came. Tessa said she had ended things with Richard after learning who he really was. She said Aunt Clara was furious and threatening to cut her off from inheritance. She said that for the first time in her life, she understood what Maya had been living through. She begged for one chance to apologize in person, just the two of us, no one else. "There's a small cafe in Brooklyn near Prospect Park. I'll be waiting at 2 in the afternoon on Saturday. Please, Mia, I need you." Maya knew she shouldn't go. She knew it could be a trap, but she remembered Tessa's eyes in old photos when they were kids, before envy and cruelty took hold. She remembered the cousin who once shared a piece of candy with her when they were 4 years old, before Aunt Clara taught Tessa that Maya was something to take from. Maybe that little girl was still somewhere inside her. Saturday came. Maya slipped out of the penthouse while Matteo was out, left a note saying she needed some fresh air and would be back before evening, put on a hooded coat and sunglasses, took a cab to Brooklyn like any ordinary person. The cafe was small and warm, tucked into a quiet alley, just steps from the park. Maya looked through the window and saw Tessa sitting alone inside, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, face pale and anxious. She really did look afraid. Maya pushed the door open and stepped in. Tessa looked up. tears filling her eyes, and stood like she was about to hug her. "Mia, you came." "I was scared you wouldn't." Maya stopped a few steps back, instincts still firing. "What do you want to say?" she asked carefully. Tessa opened her mouth, and the back door of the cafe burst open. 2 large men stepped in. Maya recognized them immediately. Richard's bodyguards, the same ones who had grabbed her that night. She spun to run. The front door was already blocked. Richard Mercer walked in with a smile on his face, cold as a knife. "Thank you, Tessa," he said without even looking at her. "You did very well." Maya turned to Tessa, and she saw everything she needed to see in her cousin's face. No shame, no fear, only the cold satisfaction of someone who had just finished a deal. "I'm sorry, Mia," Tessa said, but there was no apology in her voice. "You took Richard from me." "I'm just taking back what belongs to me." Maya didn't have time to scream. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. The chemical smell hit her instantly. The world tilted, and the last thing she heard before the darkness came for her was Richard's voice, low and satisfied in her ear. "This time, no one is coming to save you." Maya woke up in the dark. The smell of damp and rust burned her lungs, mixed with the cold metallic smell of blood. She couldn't tell if it was hers or someone else's. She was on freezing concrete, hands tied behind her back when she tried to sit up. Pain exploded through her body so violently she almost blacked out again. A warehouse, abandoned. The only light came from a few weak, flickering bulbs above and some moonlight leaking through shattered windows high up. Rusted steel beams stood like huge skeletons in the dark. Somewhere in the shadows, water dripped steadily, like a clock she couldn't stop. "Look who finally woke up." Richard's voice came from behind her, footsteps moving closer. He stepped into her view, white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a smile on his lips, eyes cold as a dead thing, a metal rod in his hand. "I've been waiting for this for a long time," he said, crouching down in front of her, "ever since that Thanksgiving night, when you dragged Vance in and made me look like nothing in front of everyone. Who do you think you are? A servant girl. A burden nobody wants. And you dared to look down at Richard Mercer." Maya didn't answer, just looked at him, with eyes that didn't hold any fear. She had lived through too much to be afraid of a man like him. Her silence made him furious. He stood. The first kick slammed into her stomach. The second blow came. The third. Fists, boots, the metal rod. Richard didn't rush. He hurt her slowly. Each hit calculated. He wanted her awake. He wanted her to feel every second. Beg. He roared after a blow to her ribs that made a sickening crack. Cry. Scream. Beg me to stop. Maya didn't. She lay on the ice-cold concrete, blood at the corner of her mouth, blood from the cut on her forehead, bruises blooming under her skin everywhere, and she didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with the eyes of someone who had seen too much to break. Eyes that had learned how to endure when she was 8 years old, watching her home burn. "You think staying quiet makes me respect you," Richard hissed, grabbing her hair. "You think being stubborn will make me give up. I'll break you. I'll make you kneel. You can do whatever you want to my body," Maya said finally. Her voice was quiet, but completely steady. "But you will never break me. I spent 19 years in a hell you couldn't even imagine. You think a few hits will scare me." Richard froze, his face twisting with fury. "Did Vance give you this confidence?" He spat. "Did he make you think you're special? Let me tell you the truth. To him, you're just a toy. A way to get at me. He doesn't love you. Men like him don't know what love is." Maya smiled, a small blood-streaked smile, and that smile made Richard take a step back. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. "Maybe he doesn't love me, but he treats me like a human being. He looks at me and sees a person, not something to buy and sell. He asks if I want something instead of just taking it. He's a mob boss. I'd kill her. A devil by plenty of people's standards. But compared to you, Richard Mercer, compared to my aunt, compared to Tessa, compared to all those people who call themselves decent, he has a lot more." humanity than any of you. Richard's face fell apart, not just anger, something closer to madness, the look of a man whose deepest insecurity had just been cracked open and exposed. He howled like a wounded animal. The next blow was so hard Maya heard something crack in her ribs. The world tilted. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, and the last thing she thought before the darkness took her was Mateo's gray eyes. She hoped, no matter how impossible it was, that he would find her, and if he didn't, she hoped he knew she had no regrets. No regret about that Thanksgiving night, no regret about the $200, no regret about any of it. Mateo Vance knew something was wrong the moment he walked into the penthouse and didn't smell coffee. Meyer always brewed it in afternoon. The apartment was unnaturally quiet. The note on the kitchen counter made his chest tighten. Need some fresh air. Back before evening. He checked his watch. 8 in the evening. She'd been gone over 6 hours. No calls, no messages. Maya was not the kind of person who disappeared without a word. Tommy, he called, his voice sharp as a blade. Tommy Rush appeared immediately, reading his boss's expression in an instant. Track her phone. Now, Tommy nodded and disappeared into the study. Less than 5 minutes later, he was back, and the news froze the blood in Mateo's veins. Her phone's in Brooklyn. Prospect Park area. But boss, it hasn't moved since 3 this afternoon. Mateo didn't need to hear anything else. He knew, with the instinct of a man who had lived too long in the dark. Aurora was in danger. Get everyone moving, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. The calm before something destroys everything. I want every source, every camera, every set of eyes on the street looking for her. I want to know who she met, where she went, and who took her. I want answers in 1 hour. The machine Mateo had built over 18 years moved like a perfectly oiled weapon. Within 30 minutes, they confirmed that Maya had walked into a small cafe in Brooklyn. Security footage from nearby showed her going in alone and never coming back out. 20 minutes after that, a low-level guy tied to the Mercer network broke under pressure and gave them everything. Richard had taken a woman to an abandoned warehouse in New Jersey. 10 minutes later, they had the exact address. Mateo stood in the penthouse living room surrounded by 20 of his most trusted men, all armed. He checked his gun, chambered around. When he looked up, his gray eyes were not steel anymore. They were something else entirely, something that had no name except, I'm coming for you. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and lethal. Richard Mercer and anyone standing between me and her dies tonight. No negotiations, no prisoners. I want her alive. Everything else is irrelevant. The line of black cars tore through the New York night, crossed the bridge, plunged into New Jersey. Mateo sat in the back seat without a word. Tommy, who had been beside him for 20 years, could feel the fury boiling under that controlled surface. He had never seen Mateo like this, never seen his boss's hands shake, not for anything, not until now. They reached the warehouse close to midnight, squat and dark in the middle of an abandoned industrial zone. A few weak lights glowing inside. Richard's guards were posted outside, 4 men, armed but careless, convinced nobody would ever dare come here. They were wrong. Mateo didn't wait for a plan. He stepped out of the car and moved through the darkness like he was part of it. Before the first guard could shout a warning, a shot cracked through the quiet. Chaos erupted. Gunfire split the night. Screams, breaking glass, doors kicked open. Mateo's men surged forward like a wave breaking on shore, and he led them fearless, relentless, his gun firing with cold, deadly precision. The 4 guards outside were down in less than a minute. 2 more inside tried to fight. They were gone before they understood what was happening. Mateo stepped over their bodies without looking down, his eyes cutting through the shadows, looking for one thing, Maya, and when he kicked open that final door, when he saw her lying still on the blood-soaked concrete, when he saw Richard Mercer standing beside her with a metal rod in his hand, Mateo Vance let go of every single thing he had been holding back. Hell walked into that room, and it had his name. Richard moved faster than Mateo expected. The moment that door flew open, He grabbed Maya and yanked her up like a shield, pressed a blade against her throat. Maya groaned as her battered body was dragged upright, but her eyes opened, and when she saw Mateo standing in the doorway, the relief hit her so hard she nearly cried. He came, he really came. Stop right there. Richard roared, the blade tighter against her throat, a thin line of red appearing. Take one more step and she dies. Mateo froze mid-stride, eyes moving from Maya's bruised face to the knife at her throat, then to Richard's unhinged expression. He could shoot. He trusted his aim completely, but the risk was too big. One wrong angle and Maya was gone. Let her go, Mateo said, his voice terrifyingly calm despite the storm inside him. This is between you and me, Mercer. She has nothing to do with it. Richard laughed, the feral sound of a man with nothing left to lose. Nothing to do with it. She's the reason for all of this. She's the reason you destroyed my empire, killed my men, took everything I built, and you say she has nothing to do with it. Mateo slowly lowered his gun, a gesture of surrender that Tommy, standing behind him, never thought he would ever witness in his lifetime. Fine. What do you want? I want you dead, Richard hissed. But first, I want you on your knees. I want Mateo Vance, the great boss, kneeling in front of me, begging me to spare the life of your little servant girl. Mateo didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees. Tommy and every man in that room went absolutely still. The most powerful mob boss in New York, a man who had never once bowed to anyone, was kneeling on dirty concrete. For a girl, let her go. Mateo said, his voice even, you wanted me on my knees. I'm down. Let her go. Richard looked down at him with wild triumph. You know, Vance, I was always afraid of you. I always thought you were untouchable. But look at you, kneeling like a dog for servant girl with nothing but an ugly scar. He laughed. Love really does make people weak. While Richard was busy savoring his moment, he wasn't watching Maya. She had gone limp in his grip, silent, like she had nothing left, but her eyes were open, watching, thinking. She saw Mateo on his knees for her. She saw the pain in his eyes that he was trying so hard to hide, and she knew she couldn't let him die here, not for her, with every last ounce of strength left in her broken body. Maya bit down on the hand holding the knife, bit hard, deep, like she meant to leave a mark. Richard screamed and jerked back on instinct. The blade left her throat for a split second. A split second was all Mateo needed. He surged forward. Richard was fast. The blade drove through Mateo's shoulder at the exact moment Mateo fired. The shot exploded in the closed space. Richard Mercer stumbled backward, a hole in the center of his chest, his eyes wide, like he genuinely could not believe he had lost. He went down, and he didn't get up. Mateo staggered, blood pouring from his shoulder, but he didn't care. He crawled to Maya, who had collapsed when Richard let go. She lay there, eyes closed, her face frighteningly pale, and for one horrible second Mateo thought she was gone. Maya, he said, his voice broke, for the first time since his father died. Maya, open your eyes, look at me. Please. Her eyes fluttered open, and when they found his, she smiled. Small, blood, streaked but real. You came, she whispered. I told you, he said, his voice shaking as he pulled her into his arms, ignoring the wound in his shoulder. I'll always come. Tommy rushed over, calling for medics, for cars, for anyone. Mateo felt the world beginning to blur from blood loss, but he didn't let go of Maya. He held on tighter, as if releasing her would mean losing her forever. That's how the rescue team found them, the most ruthless mob boss in New York, and the girl with the $200, both soaked in blood, both fading but refusing to let go of each other. Tommy would say later, even after Mateo lost consciousness, his hand was still locked around hers, as if even in the dark he refused to let her go. 3 weeks passed inside the private hospital Mateo owned under a false name. Maya woke after 2 days in a coma, 3 broken ribs, a mild concussion, bruises everywhere. Mateo woke a day before her, and the first thing he did once he could stand was drag himself to her room, sit beside her bed, and refuse to leave until she opened her eyes. The days that followed were slow and painful, but they were also the most peaceful Maya had ever known in her life. She lay in the hospital bed while Matteo sat beside her, reading or working. They didn't need many words, just being in the same room was enough. But peace never lasts. 1 week after Maya could finally sit up, FBI Special Agent James Ford appeared in her hospital room with an offer. Richard Mercer was dead, but his network wasn't. His people were still out there, and if Maya was willing to testify about the plan to sell her, about the money laundering operation, about everything, the FBI could put them all away, including Aunt Clara, including Tessa. Maya sat quietly and listened, eyes fixed on the window, the gray New York sky matching her mood. She knew what it meant. Testifying against a criminal organization meant entering the witness protection program. It meant disappearing. It meant leaving Matteo. "I need time to think," she told Agent Ford. He nodded and left his card. That night, Maya told Matteo everything, didn't hide a single word. She watched his face go hard when she mentioned witness protection. "You don't have to do this," Matteo said, his voice tight but controlled. "I can protect you. I can handle this my way. Clara, Tessa, the rest of Mercer's people. I can make them all disappear. I know you can," Maya said, lifting her hand to touch his cheek. "But that's not how I want to live." He looked at her, gray eyes full of pain he was trying to keep down. "You want to leave. I want freedom," Maya said, soft but firm. "Not freedom from you, freedom from my past. For 27 years I lived in fear, fear of Aunt Clara, fear of the secret about the fire, fear of being abandoned, fear of not deserving love. If I let you fix everything in the shadows, I'll always be the girl who needed to be rescued. I don't want that anymore. I want to stand on my own, face the people who destroyed my life, take back justice with my own hands, even if it means leaving you." Matteo was quiet for a long time. He walked to the window. Maya could see how rigid his back was, holding everything in. When he turned back, his eyes still hurt, but there was respect there too. "I don't agree," he said. "I think this is dangerous. I think you're putting yourself at unnecessary risk. But I respect your right to decide your own life. And if this is what you need to truly be free, I won't stop you." He walked back, sat on the edge of her bed, took her hand. "But you have to promise me one thing." Maya looked at him, her heart racing. "What?" "Promise you'll come back," Matteo said, his voice rough. "Promise that when it's all over, when you're free, you'll come back to me. I'll wait. No matter how long, but you have to come back." Maya smiled through her tears. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft, full of everything she couldn't say out loud. "I'll come back," she whispered. "Wait for me." 1 week later, Maya signed the cooperation papers with the FBI. She gave them everything about Richard Mercer's network, about the plan to sell her, about Aunt Clara's and Tessa's roles. She told them about 19 years of abuse, about her parents' insurance money being stolen, about every crime the Harrington family had hidden for decades. The night before she entered witness protection, Matteo came to see her one last time. They didn't say much. They just held each other in the safe room the FBI had arranged. Maya pressed her ear against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. She memorized every second, every breath, every feeling, because she didn't know how long it would be before she saw him again. When dawn came and Agent Ford knocked on the door, Matteo finally let her go. "Don't forget me," he said, his voice steady. His eyes were not. Maya stood at the door, looked back at him one last time. "Never," she replied. Then she walked away without looking back, because she knew if she looked back, she wouldn't be able to leave. But she carried his image with her like a light in the dark, like a promise that no matter what came next, one day she would find her way home. 8 months in witness protection were the longest 8 months of Maya's life. She was relocated to a small town in Montana. New name, new life, working in an old bookstore. Every night she dreamed of gray eyes. She wasn't allowed to contact anyone from her old life, including Matteo. The loneliness sometimes nearly crushed her. But she didn't give up. She spent her time preparing for the trial, working with FBI attorneys, going over the evidence again and again, practicing her testimony until she could speak without her voice shaking. She wasn't going to let fear control her, not anymore, never again. The trial took place on an early spring morning at a federal courthouse in Manhattan. Maya walked in with her head held high, and for the first time in almost a year, she saw Aunt Clara and Tessa. Clara had aged badly, hollow face, eyes burning with hatred the moment she spotted Maya. Tessa was different, gaunt, hair dull, and when their eyes met, Maya saw fear in the eyes that had once been so cold and arrogant. She didn't feel triumph, only sadness. Sadness that these were the only family she had ever had. They had chosen to destroy her instead of love her. Maya was called to the witness stand on the third day. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and when she sat down facing the courtroom, she saw a familiar face in the very back row. Matteo Vance, in a perfectly tailored black suit, those gray eyes never leaving her for a single second. He came, knowing it was a risk. Knowing the FBI had eyes on his every move, he came so she would know she wasn't alone. Maya took a deep breath and began. She told them about the fire 19 years ago, about losing her parents, about how Aunt Clara took her in along with the insurance money. She told them about 19 years as an unpaid servant, about every dollar she earned being taken, about the daily humiliation. She told them about Richard Mercer, about the plan to sell her, about the night she was kidnapped and tortured in a warehouse in New Jersey. But the turning point came when the prosecutor presented something new, evidence the FBI had uncovered while investigating the Mercer network. The fire 19 years ago was not an accident. Maya's father had owed money to a small gang connected to the Mercer family. When he couldn't pay, they burned the house to send a message. It wasn't an electrical failure, it was murder, and Aunt Clara had known the truth for 19 years. Maya heard it like a punch to the stomach. She had always suspected something was wrong about that night, but hearing official confirmation was different. Her parents didn't die in an accident, they were killed. And the woman who took her in, who used that night as a weapon to control her for nearly 2 decades, had known all along. On the stand, Aunt Clara was questioned about what she knew. For the first time in Maya's entire life, Clara couldn't lie her way out. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, messages, recorded calls, all showing that she didn't just know about the murder. She used that knowledge to keep Maya under her thumb, threatening to frame her if she ever dared to resist. She stole Maya's childhood, stole her parents' money, stole 19 years of her life, all while knowing the people who murdered her parents had walked free. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Every day Maya sat and listened. Testimony, evidence, the desperate defenses of Aunt Clara and Tessa, and every day she felt another piece of the weight she'd carried for so many years being lifted off her. When the jury came back, the verdict was clear. Clara Harrington, convicted of conspiracy, financial fraud, and child abuse, 15 years in federal prison, no parole. Tessa Harrington, convicted as an accomplice to kidnapping and aggravated assault, 8 years in prison. When the judge struck the gavel, Maya didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just sat there, feeling the weight of justice, and for the first time in 27 years, she felt truly free. After the trial, she stepped out of the courthouse into bright spring sunshine. Reporters surrounded her from every direction, cameras flashing. Maya didn't see any of it. She only saw a black car parked at the curb, and a man leaning against it, gray eyes searching for her in the crowd. She walked toward him. Then her steps got faster, and then she ran and crashed into his arms. Matteo held her like he was never letting go again. "I came back," she whispered into his chest. "I know," he replied, kissing her hair. "I waited. 1 year has passed since that trial, and Maya Collins' life has changed in ways she never once let herself dream about. She stands inside her small flower shop in Brooklyn, arranging white roses in a glass vase, late afternoon sunlight pouring through the window, settling softly across her face, carrying a kind of peace she had once believed she would never know. The shop is called Collins Blooms, a name she chose to honor her parents, who were finally given justice after nearly 2 decades. She designed every corner herself, cared for every plant with her own hands, and when customers walk in, she greets them with a real smile, the smile of someone who has learned that happiness isn't something others give you, it's something you build yourself. Mateo has changed too. Over the past year, he has slowly pulled away from the most dangerous parts of his old life, moving toward legitimate businesses, real estate, hotels. Tommy likes to complain that his boss is turning into a respectable businessman, but everyone can see that Mateo has zero regrets. He didn't do it because Maya forced him to. He did it because he wanted to build a life she could stand beside with pride. They date like normal people. Dinner, movies, walks through the park on quiet weekend afternoons. Maya teaches Mateo how to take care of flowers, and he surprises himself by actually enjoying it, the act of making something beautiful instead of destroying things. Mateo teaches Maya how to trust again, how to let someone into the dark corners of your heart without being afraid. They heal each other slowly, patiently, like two wounds closing together. One autumn afternoon, as Maya is tidying up the shop after closing, the bell above the door rings. She turns and sees Mateo standing there in his familiar black suit, but something is different in his eyes, a nervousness she has never once seen in the man who once made all of New York tremble. He steps forward without a word, stands in the middle of her small flower shop, among roses and daisies and ferns, and he gets down on one knee. Maya's hand flies to her mouth. Tears fall before he even speaks. "I'm not a good man," Mateo says, his voice low and honest. "I still have darkness in me, parts of me that may never be fully in the light, but when I'm with you, I want to be better. You make me believe I can actually be redeemed." He opens a small box. Inside is a simple, elegant ring. Not a big, flashy diamond, a small blue stone, the color of the sky on the clearest day. "Maya Collins, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispers through her tears. "Yes, yes. A million times yes." The wedding happens a month later, small, warm, just the way they wanted. Only Tommy is there, Dr. Nina, Frank, the retired butler, who still comes around to check on the girl he always treated like his own granddaughter, and a few other close souls. Maya wears a simple white dress, carries a bouquet she made herself, and as she stands beside Mateo before the efficient, she knows she has finally found home. On their wedding night, they stand on the penthouse balcony, looking out over the glittering city of New York. Maya leans against her husband's shoulder, feeling his warmth, his steadiness. The girl who hired a fake boyfriend for $200 has come a long way, she says with a smile. Mateo turns to her, and for the first time since they met, she sees him smile without any armor, without any wall, just freely. "She didn't go anywhere," he says. "She just found her way home." And it's true. Maya Collins, the orphaned girl who learned to make herself invisible just to survive, has finally found where she belongs, not because Mateo saved her, but because she saved herself, and along the way, she found someone willing to walk beside her. This isn't a fairy tale. There's no perfect prince, no magic that changes everything overnight. This is the story of an ordinary woman who learned to stand back up after being knocked down, who learned to love herself after being told for years she wasn't worth loving, who learned to trust again after being betrayed more times than anyone should ever have to count. The lesson Maya leaves us with is this: your dignity is not something other people give you or take away. It lives in how you treat yourself, in how you refuse to let others decide what you're worth, in how you choose to rise, no matter how